Welcome back. This week we're going to be following up on a series we started last week on continuous integration. This is part 2 in the series, and we're going to be walking through how to configure Codeship to install, lint, and test a Polymer 2 element. If you haven't already, you should watch the previous video on setting up Travis CI as I walk through the npm scripts we'll be using in this video. To start things off, we're going to take a quick look at our package Json file. At the bottom of the file, we have the scripts that we went over in the previous video, but today we're going to be taking a look at the engine section that I added further up in the file. This section lets us define the engines that we want our element to run against and will throw warnings or errors if our environment doesn't meet these requirements. This section isn't required for Travis to run correctly, but won't cause issues for anyone using that setup. It is, however, required for Codeship to work. We need to define both our node and npm versions, which we're setting to the latest to allow for minor version bumps in the future. Codeship will read in these settings and create an environment to match these requirements during the setup process. Now we're going to head over to the Codeship website. From here we can sign in, then click on the user profile icon in the top right corner. That will provide us with the drop-down you see here. Next we're going to select Connected Services from that list. From this page, we can enable the different SCM tools that we plan on using with Codeship. For the element we're working with today, we need to make sure that GitHub is enabled by setting the toggle beside it to on. Now that our account is connected to GitHub, we're ready to configure our project by selecting the Project tab at the top. The project page shows all of our configured projects for the current organization. To add a new project, we need to click on the New Project button in the top right corner. Now that we're in the new project setup, we need to choose the SCM for the project we want to configure. In this case, our project is on GitHub, so we want to choose it by clicking on the GitHub logo. Next, we need to provide the URL to our Elements repository on GitHub. We can do this by going to our Elements GitHub page and pasting the URL below. Once we have the URL in place, we can click on the Connect button. Now that our repository is connected, we need to choose the project type that we want to run against. In this case, we're using the free version of Codeship, so we need to choose the Codeship Basic project type. That will drop us on the settings page for our new project. From this page, we can configure how we install and test our project when changes are made to the repository. The first section we'll look at is the setup commands, which are used to install and set up our project before we run tests. These commands are almost identical to the commands we use for Travis, but we have to set them through the web UI instead of a configuration file. Since our node environment is being configured using the engines property of our package JSON file, we can jump directly into our element setup. We need to install our global packages, Bower and Polymer CLI. Then we can run the Polymer install command to get our element dependencies. Once our element has all of its dependencies, we can run the linter. To do that, we first need to install ESLint and its required plugins. Then we can run the lint script through npm. Once our setup block is completed, we can scroll down on the page and take a look at the test pipeline section. By default, Codeship uses an old version of Java, but we need Java 8 to run Web Component Tester. So we need to start by using the JDK switcher to set up Java 8. After that, we need to update Firefox to a more modern version since Codeship has version 34 installed by default. To do that, we run the curl command provided by the Codeship team and set the environment variable, which I'll show you in a minute. Now that our environment is up to date, we can run the test script in npm. Before we move on, we want to save our changes by clicking the Save button in the bottom left. Next, we're going to head over to the environment section by clicking the button in the top right labeled Environment. From this page, we can set up all of the environment variables that our environment will use. As mentioned before, the curl script requires a Firefox_version variable. We'll be setting it to the latest major version available, which is 58.0. Now that our tests are configured, we can head over to the status section for our project by clicking the project name in the top left corner. This page will show all of the builds that have run so far for your project. As you can see here, I've already run the build a couple times while I was testing to make this video. To view the details on a build, you can click the commit message name. This will take you to a details page for the build where you can see each step the build went through. That wraps up part 2 of this series on continuous integration for setting up builds in Codeship. I hope this video was helpful to some of you. Next week I'll be releasing part 3 in this series, which will be setting up builds in GitLab. If you have questions, feel free to post them in the comments section here on YouTube, or you can find me on the Polymer Slack channel @amurdoch.